Are you ready to untangle from your past, recover from heartbreak, and revive your life? This is Soul CPR with your host, Ann Papayotti. We've all had soul-crushing experiences and lost ourselves in our pain, but there is a way out. On this podcast, Amazon best-selling author, award-winning life coach, and advice columnist Ann Papayotti helps us navigate the path from heartbreak to healing. So now, please welcome the host of Soul CPR, Ann Papayotti.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in today. I'm so happy if you are a regular listener or if you've recently found our show. We're so glad that you have joined us here on Soul CPR, where we dive deep into stories of resilience and transformation and the power of healing. And today I'm honored to welcome a guest whose life journey would be like an epic novel. It's filled with adventure and perseverance and reinvention. Now, Robin Curtis is a man of many talents and a lifetime of experiences. And from having a Marvel comic published at the age of 11 to serving in the military and building a 33-year career in civil aviation, to earning a black belt in the martial arts. His journey is nothing short of remarkable. He's also a former marathon runner, an ordained deacon. He performs weddings. He's also a certified scuba diver. So you see, sounds like an adventure, right? Straight from a novel. But beyond all of these achievements, Robin's true passion has always been storytelling. His debut crime thriller, Sicilian Corner, is the culmination of a lifelong love for writing, one that began as a way to escape a difficult childhood. Growing up in a military family, moving frequently, and facing divorce and estrangement and an abusive stepfather, Robin found refuge in the worlds that he created. Now, as a husband and a father of five and a proud grandfather, he's proving that it's never too late to embrace a creative calling. We're going to talk more about that later in the show. But with the sequel already in the works, he's really just getting started. So please join me in welcoming Robin to the show. I'm excited to have him here. Hi, Robin.
Hey, how are you? It's good to see you as always. You look amazing. Oftentimes, Christy and I are just amazed about what you do. Your sense of style, your professionalism, the sense of humor that you have, and just the love and passion that you show for everyone. You're just a pleasure to be around, and I just appreciate you very much for taking the time and the interest in this book and my life in general.
Well, thank you. And let's go ahead and put it out there that Robin Curtis is actually a pen name, because I'm probably going to call you Kurt, because we do know each other in our personal lives, and we share a career. We go back quite a ways, having crossed paths in our civil aviation careers. And my family and I had the pleasure of attending your and Christy's beautiful beach wedding so many years ago now. But
Can you believe that was that's 14 years ago at this point? It's incredible.
Oh my gosh. I gauge it by how small my son Chris was, because I remember him on the beach and playing around. But what a beautiful time that was. What we didn't know about one another at the time, and thank you for the compliments that you paid me. It warms my heart. But what you and I did not know about one another at the time was that we were both writers, or that we were in our hearts. Neither of us had published anything at the time except your Marvel comic, which we'll come back around to. But since then, we've both revealed ourselves, is I guess what I would say. And so I'm so happy that you're joining me today to talk on this particular platform, to talk more about that and what inspired you to do so. But to get there, let's go back to childhood. And I mentioned a little bit about that in the introduction. What was it like, Kurt, to grow up in a military family and to relocate often?
So I would say isolating for the most part. Um, we moved probably by the time I was 18 at least 10 times, 5 different states, several countries. But on the other hand, it was also very rewarding in the fact I got to see other cultures at a young age. Um, I was always the new kid.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, and you know how difficult it is to make friends. Shoot, even, getting into groups and trying to maneuver or network, it's difficult to make new friends. And as a kid, it's one of the things that I felt like I developed very well was maneuvering in and out of different social groups, but
Mhm.
yet I knew it was only temporary. So I knew that I was going to be leaving or they were going to be leaving because a lot of them were military children as well. So it was something to where you just didn't invest deeply as a
Mhm.
child into any type of relationships because you knew it was just short term. So I got very good at that, kind of, being the chameleon, being able to mold into whatever group was in front of me at the time. But I did not learn how to make long term relationships. So that's kind
Yeah.
of what it was like from place to place.
And so, did your imagination start developing during this time?
Oh, holy smoke! Yes, it's so. I was huge into comic books, like you mentioned a minute ago. And as a matter of fact, I have the comic book edition that we're talking about.
Oh, amazing.
So I have hundreds of comic books. Actually, here's the comic book.
Oh,
um,
cool.
yeah, still have it. It's almost 50 years old. It's hard to believe that that's how long ago it was.
Wow.
The story about the seconds crawl, but the years fly. That's definitely the case. But I was big into Matchbox cars. I was big into army men, if you will. I used to play this game in my room to where I would divide the army men and I would put them on one side of the room versus the other one facing each other. And I was playing by myself because that's what we had to do. I did have a little sister, but she was a little sister. She was just a pain in my
Okay.
butt.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes we would play together, but I would take a tennis ball and I would bounce the ball and I would try to knock down the opposing army until there was one man left standing. So I would develop characters within these military guys, like this
Mhm.
guy's very special, so I'm going to make sure he's extra secure in his bunker. And this guy I don't care much about, so I'm going to make him standing up front so I can get him easily. And then the matchboxes, and I got into modeling and things like that, but very soul type activities. Now, I did develop friends, and there were some places that were better than others, but I have to be honest and very transparent. There were some places that were pretty mean, especially around some of the military areas and the military bases. I think all the kids developed a sense of toughness
Mhm.
that wasn't core to my nature originally. So I
It
was the
was
skinny little kid. So I
all
was a
right.
target.
You're a target. So I hear solitary play, learning to maneuver, not getting very close in relationships, and all this. What was home life like at this point?
So my parents were divorced when I was 12 years old. Um, Up until that point, I living overseas. I mean, like I said, I have wonderful memories of living in a little town called Chipiona, Spain. It was right on off the coast of Gibraltar. We were right on the ocean. My dad always wanted to be off the military base and in the communities surrounding the military bases. So I was very ingrained into um, the Latin culture where we lived. But the only kids that you could really talk to, pick up a little Spanish here and there, but the only kids you could really talk to were other military kids. Um, so I don't want to diminish the fact that up until that point, I feel like I had wonderful experiences. He loved camping. Um, he loved traveling. We saw all kinds of things. We were always on the go. But once the divorce came, um, he not only divorced my mother, he somehow managed to divorce his kids as well.
Mm.
Because at the age of 12, um, he took off. That was it. And we were estranged for the next 50 years until his death last September. Um, I mean, he didn't even know I wrote a book. He didn't even know I was interested in writing a book. I mean, no graduations, no track meets, no any type of competition myself or my sister had. Um, he was never present. Matter of fact, he didn't even show up for her wedding. I had to stand in at the last minute. So, very much an isolated period of time. When we
Yeah.
got back to the when we got back to the states, my mom remarried,
Okay.
and that's where the trouble began.
Well,
Um,
let's go back to dad for just a minute because that's such a huge loss in life. I mean, for him to truly, it sounds like abandonment, right? For you and
yeah.
your sister. And uh, kids who experience it that way, it's often talked about. It's almost like death then, but you're saying your dad just passed away this past September. So with that estrangement happening so long ago and at such a vulnerable age for you, how did that impact you then? Were you angry? Were you sad? Can you describe your emotions?
So in the beginning, it's almost a disbelief that um, it's gone. That he was gone,
Yeah.
and you mentioned his death. In my adulthood, even to this point, it it would have been better if he would have died.
Okay.
That would have been an excuse instead of him going on to creating at least two more families past us. He was married twice more, and I have half sibling and some steps from that as well. And I saw him investing, him and my sister, and I think she was maybe more affected by it. He was investing in other children. Matter of fact, one of my stepsisters, I mean, put her through medical school. She ended up becoming a doctor. Things like that we saw long distance
Hmm.
because we weren't really part of his life
Hmm.
anymore at that point, but it was very hurtful. So I became very angry.
Okay.
My mode of using the anger, I got heavily involved into martial arts.
Okay.
Um, the running was always big for me, but again, it was just me. I didn't do a whole lot of team things.
Hmm.
I needed to express my energy physically,
That's
and
right.
I started swinging. I started punching, and um, when I was a skinnier kid. I was
Hmm.
very thin, taller but thin, kind of lanky.
Hmm.
But I seemed to be for these military kids kind of a target as well. So not only, and I guess we can go there in a minute. Not only my stepfather, my mom's second husband, um, was one to put his hands on somebody.
Hmm.
The kids at the military base were uh, mean. They wanted to prove their ground, and it literally was Forrest Gump walking onto the bus looking for a seat, and nobody would give you a seat. And then at the end of the school day, you were jumped by whoever the bully was. So I got tired of that,
Okay.
and and literally it was in Orlando on the Navy base. I got home after one of my beatings, and I told my mom, I said, I need to learn how to fight. And that next day, she took me down, and it happened to be a Navy SEAL teaching a martial arts class, and that was my introduction into martial arts at that point. And I took it throughout my adulthood.
So I'm hearing you were angry at this abandonment by your father, and you channeled it. And as you said, there was always a physical outlet. That's what you chose, but you found a productive way of channeling it. Although you found a way to prepare to defend yourself with the bullies. It's time for our first break. When we come
Okay.
back, we'll talk more about the impact of divorce. It's something that I often talk about on this show, and I appreciate having your perspective from childhood and bringing it to now. We're going to tie it into some other things and how writing became a way for resilience as well. So don't go far, and we'll be back with more Soul CPR.
Yeah.
Mike Zorich, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorich, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorich has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Soul CPR on the Bold Brave TV network. I'm Ann Papayotti here with my guest, Kurt Robinson, whose pen name is Robin Curtis, and we're going to talk about his book later in the show. But right now we're talking about on him as a child when his father divorced his mom and really abandoned the family, he and his sister. So, Kurt, I just wanted to ask a couple more questions about that, if I may. At the time, do you remember what you believed to be the demise of your parents' marriage? And if you do remember, does it differ from what you believed as an adult or happen to know now was the demise of the marriage?
So as a child, I mean, without him being there, I actually, struck out at my mother as well. I don't think as a child I separated that it was my dad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as an adult learning later on and witnessing certain things, he was a Rolling Stone. I guess modern day you would call him a player.
Right.
He thought himself as a ladies' man, and was very successful at it, to the point that even after or during my parents' divorce, there was a couple of stories to where I would get lenience in areas that I was angry with, um, store owners, principal at school, and come to find out that my dad had maneuvered into certain people's lives with their sister or their daughter or something like that, to where he was having marital affairs. So he was a dog.
Oh,
Modern day he was a dog. So yeah.
I see. And I'm also curious, did you, your sister, your mom, did any of you ever go through any type of counseling after your father left?
We did. So that is something that I do need to bring up because um, we couldn't do it on our own. And my mom tried to get a career from that point on when she didn't really have one. She ended up becoming an RN, but self through all that training and getting her own job. But during that time, we did have some counseling for that first, I would say 6 months or so. And I really feel like looking back on it, the counselor um, at least thought enough about our situation that my sister and I were stable enough that it didn't really need to continue. Obviously, as a kid, I didn't know how that conversation went with my mother, um, but it seems like we were released early. If good behavior, we got off early. So
Okay,
it wasn't like ongoing forever and ever. We had counseling, but in the beginning, it did help to talk and
gotcha.
seek professional. Yeah,
Good, good.
that professional advice helped.
Beautiful to hear because I know a lot of people ask me, should their children see a counselor after a divorce? And I always recommend it just because we don't know if the children will open up differently to someone than they will to their parents.
So, just
Now,
one quick story about that. The counselor put something on the whiteboard that stuck with me even to this day, and he drew my life in a timeline.
yeah,
And here I am, just 12 years old, and he's basically like, "Here's your life today. Here's where you're born. Here's your life today, and here's what you can expect in your lifetime if you live long enough." And he talked about how we have certain significant emotional events in life that create a diversion or a divergent line in your regular line. It takes you off track of where your normal path might have been without those events. But he says you basically end up at the end in the very same place. So don't let those emotional events that are significant deter you because you're still traveling along a line that's very similar to your original. And it always stuck with me to this day what he said in that office. So just a little
very
story there.
cool. I love that
Yeah,
because he was basically saying, don't let this event define you differently than who you're meant
exactly.
to be. I love that.
Exactly.
Well, you
Exactly.
mentioned earlier in the previous segment that your mom remarried and you implied there was some abuse. So let's talk about that. Um, in fact, you told me your mom married in a private conversation, or she was married 4 times. So which or how many of her husbands were abusive towards her, towards you, your sister?
So the first being my dad, the last was a gentleman, all of them military men.
Okay.
The last one, he came along after I was already in the military myself. Um, but number two and three, and this may surprise you, were the same person. She married the same man twice.
Okay.
Even after the events, and I don't know if you want me to go into this right now. He was an abusive man. Um, the thing that kills me, even to this day, my sister really won't talk about it, but I feel like maybe he was even sexually abusive with her because there was a couple of times that she said she would wake up and she would she would describe a situation where maybe he was touching her in her sleep, and she would say, "Must be a dream, mom, must be a dream, mom," and she would just play it off. But I can tell you the last day of their first marriage and describe, and maybe that'll put it in context
Okay.
of what it was like. So I was sitting in one of the front rooms of the house, and I heard my sister, who's 2 years younger than I am. I was probably 13, 14 maybe. I heard her screaming out, and it was one of those screams that something's going on, that you got to react to. And I came around the corner into the kitchen, and this man had my mother by the throat, and my mother was on her knees, and she was trying, his arms free, his hands free from her neck. And my sister was doing the best she could to claw at him. She was small at the time as well. And she wasn't making a difference. So, as the young, skinny kid with all my might, and like any kid, I think would protect their mother, I did my best. I went in full force, and thankfully, it was enough of a distraction that he let go of my mother. Fearfully and terrifyingly, when he turned, his focus was on me. So I was successful in getting him off my mother, and I knew what it was like to get hit by a full-grown man. And a full-grown man's punch, it was a close-handed punch. Thankfully, he didn't hit me in the face or the throat. He hit me in the chest area, but it was enough to send me backwards over the kitchen table that was right there. A man's hand should never be used like that against a child. But again, that was him. I think that was the nature of the man. He was very dismissive. I was a nuisance to him. Me and my sister were nuisances. I don't blame him. It's kind of weird. I don't blame him. I blame my father, because my father left us to that situation when he shouldn't have. So that's where the resentment harbored from those type of situations. I always put it back on him, if that makes sense.
I do. It does make sense. And now you said that was the last day of the first marriage. So do you have any blame or resentment towards your mom for having remarried him?
So my mom tried the best she could. The stories of her childhood, my mom's family is Sicilian, and my grandfather was a very hard man. World War II, served in Saipan for 3-4 years over there fighting. He we had to. My grandfather was a man that we had to pay homage to. It almost sounds like a movie. But when we arrived there, when we walked in the front door, each one of us kids would have to go in separately and say something to him in the back room before we could do anything else. You had to give respect to my grandfather.
Huh.
But the stories I hear from my mom were even more brutal than what I experienced. And, it's that generational thing that I knew when I became a father that I did not want to go any further. It can stop, and it has to stop from generation to generation. And from what I was told, his brothers were mean to him. His father was mean to him. They were from Sicily, and they were just hard people. And it's something that when I look back on it, it's such a negative that I knew I needed that negative energy and use it for my own good to turn it to a positive. I learned
Right.
so much from the negativity that it
Right.
empowered me to say everything that I've seen and experienced and done, that
Mhm.
can't happen anymore. And that's how
Yeah.
I'm going to live my life. So,
Did you ever have a male role model in your life from any walk of life who was positive and moral and ethical, and that family man that did give you another example to follow?
I did. Actually, it was a coach in high school. He's passed now. He was the head football coach, or maybe he was an assistant, but he was the head track coach. And that's what I did in high school: is ran track and cross country, and did the martial arts as a side thing. His name was Coach Jeff Pomeroy. I still remember him to this day. He would have me over to his house for cookouts. He used to call me the Big L because my feet were as long as, I look like a big L because I was so skinny from the side. I looked like a beanpole with some feet sticking out.
Yeah.
And he would call me the big L. But so kind. And they didn't have any kids. And it almost felt like he knew, and without me ever telling him the story,
Mhm.
that I needed protection and that I needed guidance. And to this day, those cookouts, the simple things, just cookouts and talking to me, putting his arm around me, asking me how things were going. Those are things that were so impactful that, I've learned even from that, his example, it's the small things sometimes. It's the pat on the back, it's the arm around the shoulders. It's just that moment in time that you can take and invest in somebody that you just don't realize how impactful that is for that person. And it was very impactful what he did for me.
Amen. So Coach Pomeroy, right?
Yeah,
Thank you, Coach Pomeroy, and all the men out there like him who may not know the impact they're making on the kids that are out there and in their wherewithal. And you went to high school in Florida, right?
I did. Pensacola, Florida. Yeah, Scambia High School was my our claim to fame. Emmett Smith and a couple other good football players went to high school there as well. So I got to see Emmett Smith play. I was actually in a junior college, Pensacola Junior College, and I went back and I got to see Emmett Smith play as a freshman in high school. And he was
Oh,
good back then. He was good. He was really
wow.
good.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we are approaching our second break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little more. I want to know what drove you to go into the military after all those experiences that you've lived.
Yeah.
And then we're going to come into writing this wonderful novel that you've written. So don't go far. We're going to be back with more with Kurt and Soul CPR.
Dr. RC will share extraordinary resources and services that promote educational success, as well as making a difference in the lives of all social workers, as well as the lives of children, adolescents, and teens of today. She will have open discussions addressing many of the issues that we face about our youth and how being employed in the uniquely skilled profession of social work for over 18 years has taught invaluable lessons through her personal experiences. She will also provide real-life facts, examples, and personal stories that will confirm that why serving as a child advocate is extremely beneficial when addressing the needs of the whole child. Listen live to Dare to Soar, Saturdays, 10 a.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network, and tune in radio as Dr. RC will provide thought-provoking information that will empower, encourage, and strengthen students, families, and communities across our nation. You can also visit her at soarwithkatie.com. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
And we're back. I'm Ann Papayotti here with my special guest today. Robin Curtis is his pen name. I know him as Kurt Robinson, and we're going to figure out how you can find him later in the last segment. But first of all, Kurt, I'm really curious, and I imagine listeners would be as well. What led you to join the military after all of those experiences you shared with us that weren't so positive associated? Now, some of the moving was, some of the locations, you said you learned a lot about cultures and all of that, but what led you to join the military?
So upon graduating high school, I actually was offered a chance to go to a medical school where you go, Huntington Medical University in Alabama. Um, and um, so I was a state level athlete in track at that point and competed at state level my senior year and was offered a scholarship for the first 4 years, which, like 90% of the graduates would go into medical school. But I was lost, and my mom, believe me, this is no blame on my mom, but there was really no, guidance as far as what steps I should take. And basically, I was talked out of going that route. Well, it just so happened at that my dad was teaching. He was teaching English at the university in Louisiana. At the time, it was Southwest USL, the Raging Cajuns, in Lafayette, Louisiana. He was actually a professor there, and he offered free college there. And one thing led to another, and I ended up saying, hey, this may be an opportunity for me to get to know something at 18 years old that I didn't know about them, maybe gain some understanding, because it had been a long 6 years, if you will. And so I did move there. And, I'm going to cut out a lot of the middle parts of the story, but I used to drive by either to work or when I hadn't started classes yet. So I got a little job there. And I used to drive by Petroleum Helicopters Incorporated. It was a little helicopter outfit that serviced the oil rigs offshore. And one day I walked in there and I found this guy, and he was the typical army sergeant looking guy with like this, the half butt, half lit cigar. And he's like, "What are you doing in here?" And I'm like, "Hey, I want to know how I get to work on the helicopters." And I said, "I'm really interested. I love the thought of them." And he goes, "Well, you got to join the military. That's what I did, and that's what you need to do." So the next day, I went down to a recruiter, and so it was more, and said, "Hey, I'm interested in helicopters." And it just so happened I was standing outside the Marine Corps door because I wanted to fight, right? I wanted to be tough and rough and all the guy stuff, right? Testosterone just exploding. And I was invincible at that point in my life. And it just so happened that an Air Force recruiter, that's their offices were all right next to each other. An Air Force recruiter stepped out and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I was like, I want to join the Marines. I want to be on helicopters. And he goes, "Well, the Air Force has helicopters." And I was like, "What? Air Force has helicopters?" And one thing led to another. And I think I signed that same day, guaranteed to work on helicopters. So it was more of a career driven at that point, that I was just interested in aviation. I was always fascinated with, going to the stars and flying and the concept around it. I had very bad eyes. So I literally wore Coke bottles at one point in my life before I got the surgery.
Yeah.
Um, and it was, I knew my vision was going to stop me from doing any kind of pilot training. So I went mechanic instead and been
Yeah.
there ever since and loved it. Great career, loved it. And the military did give me that sense of belonging, and it taught me the team. It took me out of being a loner because you're forced out of it. But then
Yeah.
I started learning to enjoy people. Some of my best friends in the world are military people, and still to this day, 35 years later,
Yeah.
still think I could just walk into a room and they would be my best friends still to this day.
That's
So
amazing. It's a true brotherhood. I have my youngest, who's not mine by blood, who's in the military, and I believe that same thing's going to happen for him. And he was a lone wolf before this as well. So I look forward to seeing him develop and grow in that way as well. So so 41 years total, I think, between military and now civilian aviation. So certainly you've lived that calling. Fighting, like you said, you learned to fight, and it was that loner calling. You were always active, you were moving. The military became this new path. You got to take me back to the fact that you're an ordained minister. What did religion or ministry have to do with something with either your healing or your moving forward in life past your past.
Right. So I think a child that grows up in a solitary environment, there's always going to be that hole, that emptiness, um, of just kind of that communal spirit, that family. Because even though I had a strong family unit when I was around them, as far as like the Sicilians or being on the Robinson side, who are English Irish types, um, in the alone times, there, my mom worked double shifts. She did everything she could, and I appreciate that about her. She showed me a work ethic, far bar none. I mean, she was always seemed like she was at work. But me and my sister were latchkey kids, and there's a certain amount, even though you could pluck us out of society and put us in the woods and we'll be just fine and we'll survive no problem, there's still that longing for some type of spirituality. There's that hole. and and I began to look for that family outside of my own family, and church fell into play. Actually, he was a military man. He was a chief master sergeant. McKinnon was his last name. I can't remember his first name. He invited me to church, and during that process is when I first found my salvation, and it just developed throughout the years. Became a teacher, Sunday school teacher for many, many years. Became ordained. Still do weddings. If anybody's interested, you can contact me. I think I've done five weddings in the last 2 years. So open. I love weddings. It's the perfect time. It's the union of two souls, two people. It's the happiest moment, hopefully. Hopefully it's the happiest moment in their lives. And from that, I just get such enjoyment about being around people and talking about God, and just learning more about it. So I just gravitated towards it because there was a hole.
So, how did this marathon runner, martial arts specialist, aviation career man come to write a crime novel?
So I so when I started thinking about running, about writing, it always, there's a certain ember, I think, even from a young age, of sending my story into Marvel comic books, and later on, in 1976, seeing my story published, although I didn't get anything for it. You know, maybe I could get some kind of dividends back. I don't know what 50 years of Marvel dividends would look like, um, but it's I always had stories. As a matter of fact, I've probably got 12 books outlined, and it's all types of genres. It's not just the crime dramas, the novels. Even though I want to do, probably three of these before it's done in this series, I do
Mhm.
want to write nonfiction. I want to talk about some of the stuff like we're talking about now from my perspective. I'm not a professional in that realm, but I think I have, maybe something to give that might help people, and that's where I want to do, where I want to be. So writing was an outlet because of I get to take my story and I get to embed it in a fictional way
Yeah,
that very few would be able to figure out what's truth and what's fiction.
yeah,
And I was able to express myself in this first book. It's a diary. It's not so the scenes or the characters and everything about it's fiction. It's totally fiction. But the characters themselves, I was able to take little pieces or chunks of my own personality and the
hmm
way I would think about this situation or that situation, and I'd be able to express those lifelong feelings embedded into what the characters were doing. And
Wow.
it's liberating. It truly is liberating. I'm excited. I feel like a 12-year-old kid. I've got the energy of it at 60 years old. I got the energy of a 12-year-old. All I can think about doing at the moment is I have a job. Let me back up. It's not
Yeah.
all I'm thinking about doing,
Thank you.
but in my spare time, I love the fact, and I feel the sense of urgency that I need to get them all written, and
Okay.
and I think that's creating that energy. But it was an outlet. It was an outlet to express myself in a way that um, is brutal at sometimes, but some of the things I saw and felt were brutal, and I'm able to close them. I'm able to write that chapter and almost turn the page and close that
Yeah.
chapter of the book and put it away in real life as well.
What a
So,
beautiful way to express that. Because, first of all, I want to tell you that I took this beautiful book on
yes.
vacation and I couldn't put it down. And while I
Thank you.
haven't finished it yet, so no spoilers, please.
Okay.
I It is a page turner and it is brutal at times because it is a crime novel, okay? And it's set in New Orleans and it's got this the Italian kind of
Nice.
Sicilian back, there it's happening and but the way you develop your characters is I feel like I'm watching a popular Netflix series episode by episode, and I can't wait for the next one. I'm like on a binge, and I know I'm in touch with their feelings and their emotions, and seeing where's the twist going to come and what's next. And I'm in their shoes, each and every one of them, and that's a master, Kurt. You have written this masterly. And I believe you could sell this to a screenwriter if you choose to do so. And I know you're working on the sequel, and like you said, you may do 3 in this series. I hope you do because I think that people who read this and become fans of yours are going to want it. They're going to demand it even. But I'm telling you that as I'm reading it, because I know you, I'm thinking, which character is he? But I think I'm hearing you say you're a compilation. There's these
I'm
different
all of them.
things. Okay.
I'm
Um,
all of them.
but the way I'm going, oh my gosh, this is marriage. How many people have experienced this in their marriage? And how many people have thought this or felt this? And so very, very relatable. And I highly recommend the read, listeners. I really,
I
really
appreciate
do.
that. Coming from
Yeah.
you, Ann, I really appreciate that because I respect you for what you've done and the show and the books and just your life example. I truly appreciate what you're saying. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, what I hear from you is that there's been healing through writing.
There is.
Is that true? Okay.
That
All
is
right.
true. Absolutely.
I know that you and I both agree that everyone has a story, at least one or more. Not everyone's story is something they want to share publicly, and
Right.
not everyone wants to share it in the form of a book. But for those who do, but don't feel worthy or whatever may be holding them back, what would you say to them?
I would say just do it. Um, and just, even if you don't feel like writing, just start putting your thoughts down. Or even the way I started it literally was sitting in my first words on paper were sitting in a waiting room, waiting for a loved one to come out of surgery. And all I did was, I was sitting there with my laptop and I was like, I'm just going to describe this room and see what words come out describing the room. It never made it into the book or anything like that. But each day that you come across a person, whether they're positive or negative, those personalities are impactful. And, you know, it, it was something that I could use and and if I was emotionally down or emotionally up or super excited or had a bad day, good day. Um, it still was a way to express, even though you're not maybe just writing chapter after chapter. Just put your thoughts and emotions down on a piece of paper, and it is calming. It is satisfying. It's healing. It's
Right.
healing. And because the first thing I thought I wanted to write, which I was like, this is ridiculous. I was going to do. I'm going to do an autobiography, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's going to sell. Autobiography of Kurt Robinson. Normal, average, everyday Joe. And I was like, but by going fiction, I could create characters and I could write about myself, but yet hide it within the characters. And it's so funny because I just did a book club reading here where I live, and during the question and answers of the audience, um, they were referring to my characters like they live next door to me. They're like, well,
I get
do you know what John's going to have for dinner tonight? And I'm like, that's just a character in the book, right? But what I began to realize is that people start to identify
that. Hmm.
with the characters. And thus, in turn, what that means is that they're identifying with me.
Yes.
And and therefore, my investment back into them, knowing, that they are paying attention, if you will, is is something that I always want to make sure I do, is take the time for that, and make sure that they know that I care about what's going on with them and in their lives as well. But I know not everybody's a writer, so
Yep.
not everybody's going to do it. But it really doesn't matter. I think whatever your avenue is, there needs to be something in all of our lives
Yeah.
that you can invest in and get that same type of reward back. There's
Yeah.
something out there for everyone.
All right. We're going to take our final break. And when we come back, we're going to have some closing thoughts
Okay.
with Robin Curtis, author of Sicilian Corner, available on Amazon. We'll be back in just a moment.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
As we wrap up today's episode of Soul CPR, I just want to ask you, Kurt, do you have a key takeaway for today's audience you want to leave them with?
I do. So, and we talked about it a little bit. I do believe everyone has a story. It doesn't mean that everyone's a writer, but everyone has a story. And, the growth comes from your personal history and the way that you use it. I'm sure there are stories out there that are way more impactful than mine. I feel blessed in what I experienced and everything that happened to me, the people in and out of my lives, the ones that are long term, and the spot I'm in today. I feel truly blessed. So it has been a wonderful life, if you will, even with the negativity early on and the feelings that I had. It has been a joy and a pleasure to be on this earth. Um, I believe that people need to express themselves in a healthy outlet. That
Mm-hmm.
people need to find their way, whatever that looks like. Mine early on was physical, but as you get older, it changed. And right now, I've got bushes waiting on me in the backyard to plant
Yeah.
along the fence line, and those are things that I enjoy to do as well as I get older. And it's an outlet or a release besides just the writing. So time is short. The seconds crawl, the years fly by. And I believe that you should always say yes to family events. You can take naps later, but we don't have very long. And we always need to be involved. We need to go ahead and get those precious moments when we can. So be kind, be patient, love one another. I have to go. Um, but each one of you has a chapter in your life as well. And I just hope that your book is well written at the end as well.
That's beautiful. And I just want to commend you because we do know that hurting people tend to hurt people. You overcame that. You have become an amazing father, stepfather, grandfather, husband, friend, employee, all of those things. You made a choice. It is a choice. No matter your side of domestic abuse and violence, you have a choice. You can choose to heal. I do want to give the domestic violence hotline, since we did talk about abuse today. 911, if you're in a situation, call it. If you're observing it, witnessing it, or it's happening to you, 911 always. The hotline.org for the National Domestic Hotline, 800-799-SAFE. That's 7233 at the end, or you can text START 88788. 24/7, those lines are manned. Kurt, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing your stories and your book. And the book is available on Amazon, and you can connect with Kurt on LinkedIn at Kurt Robinson is where you're going to find him, right? And then we've got in the show notes everything else. And as we're closing out today, I just want to remind everyone that healing is not a linear journey. It is a process of profound transformation, as you heard in Kurt's life examples there. And if today's story resonated with you or this episode, please like it, share it, rate it, and give this to someone else. Share this podcast who may need a lifeline of their own or inspiration and motivation from the story of Kurt's life. We'd appreciate subscribing, rating, and leaving us a review so we can reach more hearts. That's how these algorithms work, right? You can always connect with me on social media as well. I can help you reach Kurt. Facebook at Skyview Coaching, LinkedIn, X, Instagram at Ann Papayoti. Let me know your thoughts, your stories, and the other types of subject matter you'd like to bring to the show, and we're going to make that happen. Thank you for listening. And until next time, may you find strength in your vulnerability and courage in your journey. And as always, breathe deeply, love openly, and live soulfully. Good day, everyone. Thanks again, Kurt.
This has been Soul CPR with host Ann Papayoti. Breathe life back into your spirit with each episode, where she and special guests explore the relationships that hurt us and discover that healing can only begin with you. Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.